How's it going, Star Seekers? My name's Luke and welcome back to the channel, where today I'm bringing you another review, this time for a game called Macrotis, A Mother's Journey. It's a physics-based puzzle platformer which follows the journey of Mother Bilby, a mouse-like creature who, after getting caught up in a terrible rainstorm, ends up separated from her children and must make her way back to the surface with the help of a kindly wizard. Promising to offer an emotional journey and hours of adventure filled with puzzles, Macrotis sounds like a decent little platformer, but how well does it perform on the Switch, and is it worth your hard-earned cash? In this review, I aim to answer those questions, so go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to be notified of future reviews, and let's get into it. So Macrotis released on Steam in 2019 and last year on other platforms, and now it's come to the Switch where it's available for £10.99 on the UK eShop and $11.99 on the US eShop. Now the game begins with an opening cutscene where some nicely drawn images introduce us to the game's protagonist, Mother Bilby. In the intro we get to witness a raging storm which washes her away from her children, and she then ends up underground somewhere with no idea about the fate of them or if she'll ever see them again. Now the game's story follows Ma Bilby's journey as she attempts to get back to the surface, but in a freak accident involving an exploding magic crystal, she inadvertently ends up killing Gandalf. Luckily though, the old wizard is a rather kind chap and he decides to help Mother Bilby and even grants her some of his powers, and so the two work together to reach the surface, reunite Mother Bilby with her children and put a stop to the terrible storm. Now the first chapter of Macrotis introduces us to the game's controls by easing us in with some basic platforming. Movement is handled by the left analog stick, we can jump with the B button, and we're also able to perform consecutive wall jumps like some kind of rodent Ninja Gaiden. We also learn about some basic physics in this first chapter, and we're tasked with things like creeping across fragile platforms by holding ZL, knowing our way through vines to drop big rocks, and pushing and pulling various objects by holding ZR. Now the intro section is not too bad, we get a few simple puzzles to get the brain juices flowing, but there's nothing too strenuous or overly challenging. One thing this area does teach you though is that puzzles usually have to be solved in a certain order, and as I played my way through the game, this became ever more apparent. Dropping the wrong boulder or pushing a box off a ledge too soon can lead to puzzles becoming unsolvable, which forces you to hit up on the D-pad to start them over. And while I don't mind having to restart because of something that I screwed up, I did find that many of the game's puzzles involved elements of trial and error. The order in which to perform certain actions in puzzles wasn't always clear, and on several occasions, I did get a little annoyed after getting to the last step of a puzzle only to realise that I couldn't get back to a certain box or lever that I needed to push. Now following the first chapter and our encounter with Gandalf, we then gain access to our first power, which grants us the ability to leave our body and travel in spirit form. While in this form, we're able to perform all of the same actions we could in our real body, but we also gain the ability to pass through solid walls and run freely on fragile surfaces. This form does have its limitations though, and travelling too far from our body or dying in spirit form will return us back to our body, though of course we can also do this at any time manually by hitting the L button. Now the puzzles in Macrotis pick up a bit after we gain our spirit form, and even more so after we gain our second ability, which allows us to erect walls. We're able to generate up to 3 walls at any time, and these can be both utilised as platforms to reach higher places, as well as barriers to block other objects, traps, and doorways. Now many of the game's puzzles require a combination of the two, and I was actually quite surprised at how tricky the puzzles got towards the end of the game. While Macrotis looks very much like it should be a child's game, I honestly think that younger children would struggle to complete some of the puzzles, and if you're considering picking it up for your kids, just know that they might need your help at some points in the game. Now when it comes to level design in Macrotis, things are kept quite simple to start with, but they do become more complex the further into the game you get. A few different elements are introduced throughout the game, such as switches with different symbols on them, moving platforms, water-based puzzles, and a couple of different trap types, but overall there aren't really that many mechanics to learn. Now this simplicity can be seen as both a positive and a negative thing, as it keeps things simple and accessible to younger audiences, but as an adult, I kind of wanted something more complex to deal with, and my favourite parts of the game were these kind of chase sections, which force you to move quickly and solve puzzles on the go. In all though, Macrotis isn't a bad little puzzle platformer, though character movement can feel a little clunky at times, and I did have one occasion where the game completely crashed on me. The game kind of reminded me of those classic PlayStation platformers, but even more strangely, it also kind of reminded me of a little game called Dongo Adventure, or at least what poor little Dongo was aspiring to be like. Now when it comes to the audio and visuals in Macrotis, I do think that the eShop trailer has been a little cheeky with this one. While the visuals aren't too bad and there are some pretty nice looking areas, we do still get some frame rate issues, and the trailer footage is most definitely not taken from the Switch version of the game. On the audio side of things, the sound effects and voiceovers are pretty decent, and I did like the little conversations that the wizard and Ma Bilby have throughout the travels together. The game's soundtrack isn't too bad either, though it does kind of have that generic fantasy music feel to it. So overall, Macrotis took me around 4 or 5 hours to complete, and while I did get pretty frustrated at times, I still quite enjoyed my playthrough of the game. When it comes down to my own personal rating of the game, I'm going to be giving Macrotis 3 out of 5 stars. Macrotis offers a reasonable challenge and a nice little story to boot, and if you're in the market for a puzzle platformer with a bit of a classic PlayStation vibe to it, then Macrotis: A Mother's Tale might be worth picking up. And so that just about does it for this review of Macrotis: A Mother's Tale on the Nintendo Switch. Do me the honours of hitting that like button if you enjoyed this review or if it helped you out. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on the game in the comments section below. And if you haven't already done so, then consider subscribing to the channel as I upload new Nintendo Switch reviews and content every few days. For now though, I just want to thank you all once again for watching, and until next time, take care of yourselves and game on.